Okay, Mike, I was wondering, you're from Canada, and you have lived in America, and we work together, and in our company, everybody is American but you. So, how would you say Canadians are different than Americans?
Well, first of all, to be honest, just to start, I'll say that Canadians and Americans, I think, share a lot more similar qualities than they do differences. I mean, I think Canadians have a lot more in common with Americans than they do even with English people who are like from Britain, who were the original sort of Canadians, I suppose, a few hundred years ago. So in that way, I think that, like, again, just to preempt it by saying we're very similar. However, there's definitely some differences, I think, between Americans and Canadians. First of all, I think Canadians in general are maybe a little bit more humble. Not to put this in a negative way, but they're not as willing to engage in an argument or to argue over a point, I think, as most of my American friends who will want to debate and get to the bottom of a topic. Canadians would rather just sort of back off and say, you're right, that's fine, great. But again, and I can't speak for all Canadians because it depends on your personality too. But just to generalize, that's one difference. Also, I would say that Americans in general tend to be a lot more businesslike, and maybe even a little bit more conservative in the way that they, I guess, view relations or view discussions with people. But Canadians tend to be a little bit more liberal, a little bit more, free and easygoing. Again, I'll preempt that by saying that all of the Americans that I work with, I think, are quite liberal and not conservative thinking at all. But if you want to generalize culturally, then I think those are probably a couple of differences between the two cultures, or people in the cultures.
Yeah. Anything else? Any other differences?
Well, I think one thing that Americans tend to point to with Canadians, and it is true to some extent, other than our love of hockey, is the sense of humor. I think Canadians in general tend to have I wouldn't say unique, but they just tend to look at things with a little bit more of a bit of humor to it. And I think the main reason for that is because it's so bloody cold in Canada.
Oh, fair enough. Thanks, Mike.
Sure.